Hello, my friends, and welcome to Quartet. So nice to have you with us. The sun is shining nicely in a December day here in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, and it's nice to have you with us today. We've gotten together, as we always have, with all of our friends. Kingsley Dennis. Hello, Kingsley in the UK. How are you?
Greetings, John, and to everyone watching, and to Greg and Penny. Always a pleasure to be with you, especially now at this end of the 2023. So thanks.
And Penny Kelly in Michigan. How are you?
I'm great. And hi to everybody out there. So you guys don't know how good it is to be able to talk to you. So thank you for doing this.
And Greg Braden, then in the
I
New
am
Mexico.
feeling, yeah, I'm coming to you from our studio in Santa Fe, just outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico. Penny, you make me feel really appreciated
Oh, you
today.
are.
Thank you. And Kingsley and John, I just realized this is, in fact, the last program of the 2023 season. So I'm honored to be here with all of you today.
Yeah, it is. It's been a good year, and it's very much appreciated. All you should all know, and I'm going to send them off to all of you on the panel. Is that I get on the side all kinds of wonderful comments from people who very much appreciate what we do here, and so it's not only fun for us, but it's doing. Making a difference in people's lives. And so we appreciate that. So we get together like this every 2 weeks, of course, and we talk about some big things about related to the big change that's going on in the world. And today we're going to talk about the off ramp. What is the kind of the transition that we can effectively make going into the future so that we don't get sucked into the technocratic world of technology. What's the off ramp that lets us kind of move towards a new world and a new human? And so that should be an interesting conversation, I'm sure. So thank you. And it's time for questions. We get a lot of wonderful comments and questions throughout the 2 week period between the times when we tape this program. And this time we've got some interesting ones. We've got some comments from Ann Bogard and Janine Rickert and Sarah Chetkin, and we thank you for your thoughtful comments. Cynthia Larson wrote about Carl Jung and memories and dreams and reflections, and how that Jung talked about that you get advancements by reforms in one case, but she raised the whole question about the possibility that you can get reforms. She said that reforms by advances, and the alternative possibility she suggests are reforms by retrogression. They are, as a rule, less expensive and, in addition, more lasting, for they return to the simpler, tried and tested ways of the past. What reforms by retrogression would you most like to see in these chaotic times? So I'll just open that up and let any of the three of you go for that one.
Yeah, John, when I saw this, it reminded me of a number of the conversations we've had here on Quartet, where there's a large segment of our population, and not just in America, who doesn't have time to keep up with everything that's going on in the world. They don't have all the details. They just know that things are moving quickly, things are moving in a direction they're not happy with, and that they've made a choice to unplug and go back to a simpler way of life. And I think that might be what that retrogression is, and the way that shows up in my rural community here in northern New Mexico is adults pulling their children out of public schools and homeschooling, because the schools are no longer teaching skills that are useful in these young people's lives. They're indoctrinating them into belief systems, financial systems, and banking systems, which are two very different things. A lot of people are pulling out, looking for alternatives. They're going to barter systems here. And certainly with healthcare, people are going back to the basics of trying to get healthy and using herbal and traditional medicine that, you know, I'm seeing that. And in general, a decentralization of the centralized functions that we've all been conditioned to use in the past. Those all could be seen as either evolutionary progress, or it could be seen as what she's calling retrogression, going back to systems that are tried and proven from the past, leaving what were considered to be more advanced systems that we've got today. So.
I'd like to add there as well. I think it's a very telling comment coming from Young, and I think it pertains to our discussion today. Now, Young, obviously being very heavily interested in alchemy in his later years, he built by his own hand a tower called Bollingdon Tower, where he would spend months, the summer months, alone there. He had no electricity, no modern technologies at all, and in fact he would talk to his kitchen, his utensils, he would talk to the stone. He believed that everything was animated. But the main thing I would like to say that Young would spend months there alone, not talking to anybody. So I think one of the retrogressive technologies in this aspect would be learning to be with ourselves and not being bored, by not having stimulus and being able to be animated by our own presence. And I think Young symbolized that in his activities there.
Well, if we had a cyber attack that knocked out the internet, you'd be forced into that situation. That's for sure. Thank you, Cynthia, and thank you both. Stephen Hyde says, has the transformation already happened? Are we experiencing transformation through the lens of a limited belief created by a process of endless streams of trauma? This is interesting. Are we waiting on the 100th monkey to see past limiting belief and perceive the truth that transformation has already happened? Oh, what do you think about that, Penny Kelly?
I think it's in progress. It's in process. It's happening. So, yes, the answer to the question would be yes, although it doesn't happen like most people imagine, instant transformation. There's a lot of work that has to be done to back that up. There's a lot of internal change that has to happen. Things like personal responsibility. We have to reconnect to nature. Some of the things Gregg was mentioning for Cynthia's question, more local connection, local business. And most of all, we need to pay attention to which direction is that transformation going. It's not going to be the same for everyone. It'll be unique for each individual. And that's part of the magic of having a system, a reality system. Everybody brings what they perceive, what they feel, what they think, they create what they want. They create their niche, so to speak.
So it's time for our topic of the day. And our topic of today is about essentially, how do you not get swept downstream by the extraordinary kind of efforts and pressure and the currents that are trying to drive us into a dependency and control and suppression by the technologies that are showing up and inserting themselves in our life in ways that humanity's never experienced before. How do you get out of that? What's the off-ramp in this kind of process? This is a really interesting and important kind of question to me, because all of us are heavily dependent upon technology. The fact that we can sit here, each of us in our own location around the world, and speak to people all over the place is a technology that didn't exist 10 years ago. And yet it's commonplace now in ways that it was impossible to anticipate for most of our lifetimes. And so there is this huge kind of wave of increasing technological advances that has the distinct possibility of just kind of sweeping you downstream in ways that you just really can't get out of the way of. I mean, there are efforts at multiple levels in the government and in industry and, you know, within education, all kinds of places that are all kind of pointing in the same direction to move us into this space of extreme dependency. And yet that is fundamentally antithetical to the basic idea that we all embrace, which is that there's a new emergent, new human being that can come out of the middle of this. That in fact, it's our job, in fact, to rise to the occasion such that we can effectively extract ourselves from that major narrative and rise to being able to access the intrinsic kind of capabilities that we all have that we believe are superior to anything that the technology ultimately can generate. And so there is a middle ground. There's a middle, you know, a midterm scenario here that is kind of the transition in this whole thing. Is how do you stay plugged into this technology world as we must in order to just function? How do you stay plugged into the world such that you can extract yourself, that you can get off at some appropriate time? Or how do you start that process even now to begin to kind of wean yourself away from the controlling influence of this whole extraordinary move in terms of technology?
Let's look at this reality construct we're in, and it's a deeply materialistic paradigm. Okay, and I think if we can take a look at what's happening in the narratives, I think it's clear that let's call them, for sake of brevity, the powers that be. Okay, the powers that be are very heavily behind persuading the narrative of the material paradigm. You know, they ridicule anything which is esoteric or mystical, anything which goes away from the materialism. Now, why is that? Because I think there's a real focus for people to look at the materialism as the savior for where we are. And therefore, we've been drummed into us and conditioned to think that technology as a material construct, i.e. hardware and software, is going to be our savior. But we know from past cycles, you know, let's say these catastrophe cycles that we've talked about before, you know, the technology didn't really get passed on. If there was technology, such as in the well-known Atlantis cycle, it was part of the destruction. What did get passed on? Knowledge. The few who passed on knowledge, and it was the knowledge of the human being. So I think the first principal thing for me is that I want to answer this question by saying, for me, the real technology is the human being. And I think that makes us then realize that we don't need to put all our faith in the material technology. Now, yes, we do need it. We need technology to communicate. We need technology for mobility to a certain extent. And we may need a certain degree of technology for bartering or trade. But I think what we've been dissuaded from seeing, and this is what I call the magician's trick, you know, everything's you know, the magician has a white rabbit here, and you don't see anything here. I think the white rabbit is material technology. We've been told that, you know, it's going to save us. We need to invest in more antennas, more satellite dishes. But as you rightly said, if there is a kind of breakdown in infrastructure, all those get taken away. Now, what's been perennial through all human history is a certain technology. Let's say the shamans know about this. The great alchemists knew about this. They used technologies such as rituals. I mean, the great spiritual traditions knew how to use light as a technology, because light creates a certain vibration in our atmosphere. The same as mantras and certain you know, songs and things we say. They're all vibration. So I would say that if we do not look at these things and we go out and buy more antennas and more satellites, we're going to be redundant as a human being. So when it's taken away from us, we're going to be completely lost. And that's why I think the comment I made earlier about Young was quite telling, because Young learned how to not be bored, how to be with ourselves and not be bored, because we have to make sure we have the inner technology not to be depressed, not to go into panic mode straight away, not to be anxious, because you can be sure there'll be many people perhaps choosing the path to off-ramping by suicide, by leaving this paradigm. So how do we stay on a different ramp, which is, we have to look after ourselves. So, I would like to say here that I think the real technology is going inward and being prepared, because if something's coming, we don't know how that may trigger unknown capacities of the human body, because the human body is not fully finished yet in its development. It's not fully known. We know that we don't know about the human body and the DNA and the light cells and everything else. And I think that's the next stage. It's going to come from within. But I think the material paradigm is being deliberately pushed as the salvation, because that is a red herring. It's going to be useful to a degree. And just as an example, a good friend of mine recently, a few days ago, took an exam in ham radio, amateur radio. And he watches this, so you know who you are, so I won't name you, but thanks, Topol. So actually, I think that could be useful, because there's a certain technology there. And people may say, oh, ham radio is 1970s, it's like, rubber duck kind of trucking technology. But that's on the increase as well, I feel, because people know that it's a retro technology, which could be very useful. But I think that these are secondary things. I still would say primary, we need to spend more time being with ourselves, developing our home environment, learning not to be bored, not to be panicked, and getting a certain inner state. Because what's coming, its greater effect is going to have an external effect of breakdown, perhaps, and dissonance. Its greater effect is going to be how it triggers an inner response. And I think that's my take on the technology, because the off-ramp, as the alchemists knew, as the shamans knew, the off-ramp is how to deal with contact with a different state of reality construct. The off-ramp isn't linear. The off-ramp is not to stay in this reality, is to be able to make some communication with an incoming reality and have an equilibrious, harmonious relationship between those realities. And the only technology for that is internal to the human being, John.
If we're going to, how'd you put that, wean ourselves away from, from this dependence on this technology, I don't know that we need to get rid of all of it. We certainly don't or can't. I want somebody to remember how to get natural gas to my propane tank. So, but I think the first step is going to be personal responsibility, growing up, maturing, seeing the world as it is, recognizing how much we need one another, how brilliant some people are, how we could be grateful for what they know how to do, and nurture and encourage them in doing that. So that growing up, I think, is a big deal. There are 3 doorways. I love, Kingsley, your statement about, the off-ramp is in. It's in. So the question that you have to ask is, okay, what exit are we going to take? And that's going to depend on what kind of world we want to end up in and what kind of vision we hold. And have we developed that? Do we have any kind of idea about what that could look like? I've seen a lot of different kinds of realities and how they operate, and they're all similar, but they all emphasize different things. So we have to think about that. And so far, we kind of haven't. We're caught up in, whatever is going on, what's in our face. So the 3 doorways, the first doorway is like a Kundalini type thing, or meditation, or time spent going inside and just expanding your own consciousness, getting quiet enough, pulling away from the world out there, so that you can get some visions, some ideas, some pictures about what you need to be doing. The second doorway, and these are the traditional doorways to expanding consciousness. The second doorway is Mother Nature, reconnecting with Mother Nature, because that is where security comes from. When you know how to survive on the planet, no matter what is going on, then you have security. And without that connection, anything pulls the rug out from under your nicely organized, unrealistic, kind of fakely simulated life, and you're screwed. So the connection with Mother Nature is the second door. The third door is service. It's work done from love, with love. And that service is, can be anything. It can be taking care of people. It can be, communicating, serving as a messenger. It could be growing carrots, whatever. Whatever that service is, you do it because you love it. And then you serve others by sharing what you love to do. So if you make mittens, or you make purses, or you fix cars or lawnmowers or whatever, those are your form of service. So those are the three doorways into a more expansive consciousness. And then going back to the idea of the off-ramp, do we want to go back to primitive? I don't. I'm not interested in primitive. Do we want to go back to 1950? A lot of people want to go back to 50 years ago. That's backwards is not the way forward. Okay. Do we want some kind of, WEF, World Economic Forum defined idea of how life could be, should be, ought to be? No, I don't think so. We don't want that either. What do we want? That has to be figured out and decided. And what I've seen in the future is that humans are much wiser. They're much more cooperative. They are much less dependent on being told what to do. They're not dependent at all. In fact, dependency is replaced by cooperation and inner authority. And I like that. And then we have fallen for a whole set of myths. And those myths have to be, they have to be dealt with. The biggest myth at this point in time has to do with money. When you think that money is the thing of value, you're not going to bother developing your own consciousness, your own power, or the human technology that Kingsley was just talking about. That is where our power, our future, our magic, if you will, is going to come from. And there are things that we are capable of. I often say we are threshold beings. We're on the threshold of becoming. What's that going to look like? If we fell for the idea that money is the thing of value. And concomitant with that is the idea that it's okay for a handful of people to suck all the money out of the system and keep it for themselves. Put it in, a bank account or a vault or somewhere, but they're not sharing it. And when money is the means to survival, basically it's slow death for everybody else. That has to be dealt with. And if we don't deal with that, we will go back to primitive and we'll have a civil war in the process.
I think what you both have highlighted and illustrated beautifully is that whatever choices we're going to make in the world out there are reflecting what we have come to accept as true in the world in here. So we've got to come to terms. This is the spiritual growth is what some people call it. It is the evolutionary growth of our emotions, our mental capacities, our psychological capacities, our resilience in the world when things don't go the way that we expect them to go. And all of those, I think, are reflected in the choices that we make in the world around us. You know, I remember during the lockdowns, I was amazed at how many people I knew, and some of them are actually colleagues, who were telling me that they were bored because they couldn't socialize. If you found yourself bored, it highlights our dependence on external stimuli. Do we depend on socialization, on something outside of us to keep us, stimulated and excited? So I'm right there with you. It's got to begin with the embrace of the deep truth of who we are within. So Penny, I'm with you. I don't want to live in a primitive lifestyle, and I don't think anyone does. So John, for me, the off-ramp has been the subject of Quartet, many of our personal conversations. The off-ramp is to find a parallel path that supports the choices that we and our family and our society feel are necessary in our lives. And this could be a lot of fun. You can get your family together at the family dinner table, get the kids and mom and dad and the in-laws, whoever's living there, roommates, and you sit down, you make a list. What are the showstoppers in this family's life? What is it that we would not want to be without? And once you identify those, then you find parallel resources to maintain those in the event that we have a breakdown in supply chains, we have a breakdown in power, we have a breakdown in agriculture, any of those things. So our world, our government, our nation, our infrastructure is pushing us, and I'm going to say they're pushing hard towards centralization and dependency upon those centralized systems. The off-ramp is localization, localized living. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit. We mentioned at the very beginning of the program, localized sources of finance, because Penny, as you so accurately observed, that is a foundation. It's not the core of our existence. Life is very difficult if we don't have that means of exchange. So we begin looking for decentralized everything. That means localized forms of energy when those central power grids go down, or if you can't get your propane deliveries. I'm with you, Penny. we got a 1,000-gallon propane tank sitting on our land, and it's good until it's gone. And we've had ice storms where the propane trucks can't get down the road for 2 months because the ice hasn't melted, and there's no maintenance on the roads. So what do you do with that? I think the foundation, and something everyone can begin with right now, we all to some degree are plugged into this financial system. That's why people like Elizabeth Warren, the senator who introduced this bill, and other senators and lobbyists are pushing to prevent people from having access to crypto assets because they are an off-ramp. They are decentralized, peer-to-peer. I can have financial transactions with you, John, and Kingsley and Penny directly in a matter of seconds without going through a centralized filter that can deny those transactions. And they don't want that to happen. Now, I'm just also going to say there's so much FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt that is being sown about crypto assets in general and beyond the scope of what we can do here. Bitcoin is different than all the other crypto assets. It was the first. It is transparent. It is immutable. It is secure. It's never been hacked. And it has been approved by the U.S. Security and Exchange Commission. Legally, it is considered to be a commodity and not a security. It is considered and taxed and legally owned as you would gold or silver or something like that. No other cryptos have all of that. So they're pushing hard, and the fact they're pushing so hard tells us they know that is an off-ramp to the centralized CBDC, centralized bank digital currency, that will unleash a form of control upon the people of the United States that to a degree we've never seen before. And once we go there, it's going to be very hard to go back. So that is a place we can all begin, an off-ramp with finances, with savings, and with those transactions. But also alternative forms of healthcare. beyond what we have done in the past. And John, can I give a specific name of a company that is making, you know, there are times we need antibiotics and that we need medications, and especially with the new agents that are being unleashed on our populations. Some of them are bacterial, some are viruses. There's a white lung syndrome that is now sweeping America. It began in China a few weeks ago. There are other viral agents out there. There's a company called Jase, J-A-S-E, Jase Medical. You go online and you work with a healthcare professional online. There is an interview that you do, and they will help you supply your home and your family with vital medications that you may not be able to get when things break down. And it just makes sense. It's not out of fear. It's the recognition that we're living a time of extremes, and it makes sense to expect the unexpected. So those are just a couple of examples. Finances and healthcare, certainly agricultural. You know, just look for parallel alternative ways to meet what it is you and your family have identified that you think is important.
Well, thank you all. Delightful, interesting, provocative conversation. And thank all of you who are watching for being with us today. We do this every couple of weeks. And this is a product and a production of the Arlington Institute, located here in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, just down the road from Washington and Baltimore. And it's only one of a variety of interesting kind of programs that we have to help raise awareness and find solutions and anticipate kind of futures related to the new world that's coming and this extraordinary change. And so we hope you can look into that. You'll find more information at arlingtoninstitute.org. And thank you all, and we'll see you again. Warm holiday wishes. Bye-bye.
Stay well.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.